Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Superman Unlimited issue 11, written by Dan Slott with art by Lucas Meyer, colors by Giuliano Peratelli, and letters by Dave Sharp. John Kent's life takes an interesting turn as Reign of the Superboys continues thanks to Master Tiz, the fourth dimensional demon that gives everyone a rundown on the storied life of John Kent, from being born in the Fortress of Solitude to going on adventures with his grandfather Jor-El to being stuck in a time-dilated prison on Earth 3. Tiz knows all about this and more about his supposed arch-nemesis, including how one day John will rise up against him in a final battle at the heart of a singularity at the center of the universe, where Superman will destroy him unless the demon destroys him first at a time before they met. I really enjoy Dan is putting in the time to give John an actual villain of his own. This isn't some villain that, his father fought long ago and is taking revenge on the young hero, or it's a kidified version of Lex Luthor or something. It's actually his own villain, something John actually has not had until now, which is insane to think about since he's been around for a long while. Reign of the Superboys just seems to be a bit of a creative rejuvenation for a lot of the writers involved in this, and they look like they are allowed to really kind of go for it and kind of do whatever they want with these characters, which is great. With a snap of his fingers, Tiz brings John to multiple points in Smallville's history, going from the far past to the distant future where it doesn't exist anymore, all in an attempt to demoralize John and break his spirit and throw him off balance. John tries to talk with him and reason with the demon and try to figure out what's going on, and the demon just tells him that he is his arch enemy, and John wants to be Superman, and Superman needs to have an arch nemesis. The demon lets slip that Clark has disappeared, but John knows that's wrong, since he was just talking with his father, who was dealing with prankster, a trickster, a puzzler, which I find very funny because that's something that Dan continued in that two-part last issue, where no one could understand why Prankster was doing this because it's Prankster. Like, why would he ever do something so violent and everything like this? No one really cared about Prankster because it's Prankster. He's a nothing villain to Superman, and I like that John even knows that as well. They can't even get his name right, which is really funny. The demon apologizes since he's a little early, and Clark disappearing in the Omega tournament has not happened yet, since that's in a few weeks. He snaps his fingers again and time jumps them both, and in doing so, John's mind is flooded with memories as his head and body catch up to the present. That's a really cool idea, and one I don't think I've ever seen in a time travel story. A character travels into their own future and thus kind of catches up with their future, and so his mind is just flooded with all the memories of his head, just sort of making sure he's caught up on what's happened so far, and it's like discombobulates him. That's a really cool idea, and I wish I'd see more of that sort of stuff in time travel adventures. John rights himself and attacks the demon, telling him that he is Superman. Master Tiz freezes time and decides on how he's going to break Superman and comes up with a deadly idea. He takes John into the timeline, showing him everything from the Big Bang, Earth's creation, and all of Earth's history, telling the hero that nothing he or anyone does matters, since in the end, it all just disappears into the cold, infinite void of space. John, however, remains unbroken and remembers what his father would tell him, that anything is possible and every moment matters and every life counts in the never-ending battle that he and his father and family have participated in for years. It's so nice having a competent writer using John to his full potential. He's not being a whiny, dramatic crybaby like he was in that Secret Six book. He's just a character who Dan knows and can and will grow and evolve, and see him follow after his father as Superman here and, instill those values that his father taught him is so cool. Even when confronted by a fourth dimensional demon who could do all of this stuff and change everything, he's still steadfast in his beliefs. The demon is very happy that John did his usual Superman speech, since now he knows his personal kryptonite and what it is. He tells the hero that he is the son of Superman, and that is all he ever will be. A Nepo baby who enjoys having fun with the Nepo bat babies. And when he tried getting away from that, he lost years off his life, and upon returning home, all that was waiting for him was sadness. John knows that he did good as Superman, But the Demon gloats about how he was always the knockoff Superman, since his father did eventually come back from Warworld and he was left in his father's shadow yet again. Dan is really going all out this issue, and I love it all since I can see where he's going with the story. It's pushing John to be his own person and be his own hero, which is what I've always wanted him to be. I've always wanted him to be something more than just son of Superman, son of Kal-El. It also means he'll have to grow up, but not in a physical sense, but a mental sense, since he needs to get over that obstacle of always being seen as the other Superman or the other Superboy and just become something of his own. It's kind of similar to Nightwing and how, Dick was always pushed as, the next Batman. And, for a time he tried it and it's like, yeah, it's okay, but I'm really Nightwing. I'm my own person. And I like that there is that parallel there with how Nightwing then also mentored John and mentored him into becoming a better hero and how to be your own hero. I thought that was a really nice thing that Tom Taylor did over in his Nightwing book. And I like that Dan is kind of borrowing elements from that here, where John is now realizing he has to do sort of the same thing Dick did and sort of break away and become his own being, become his own hero, his own identity. I also think it's a thing some fans do not want for John. They just want the Super Son John back, where he basically will regress to being a child, which I don't like one bit, since I know that something like that is definitely coming. We've seen the Super Son is coming up and everything, but that's not where Dan's going with that story. He's not just going to do it for fan service. He's got a story to tell, a meaningful message to it, and it won't just be young Superboy is back and here to stay. There's going to be a lesson that the older John will have to learn, and vice versa. Tiz continues to try and convince John he is a nothing Superman and he just is an afterthought, attacking him with dinosaurs and World War II fighter planes, proclaiming that he controls all of history and will use it as a weapon to defeat John. He summons a group of red-caped beings in flying cars who fire at John with red sun lasers that injure him, as Tix tells him in the grand scheme of things, Jonathan Kent will amount to absolutely nothing. Dan's getting a bit meta here with the stuff since, John hasn't really mattered in a long while, really, just because they have no idea what to do with him. As I said before, he's really just seen as the other Superman or the other Superboy, the one that's just sticking around because he has to. People will say returning him to a child will solve all of these problems, but it really will not. If anything, it's incredibly reductive in a story sense, because it just regresses him back to being a Super Son where he had no character development whatsoever during the Super Son book. It was always fight a kid version of your parents' villains and do that for 3 or 4 volumes. That's all that book was, and I don't understand why people hold it in such high regard. There was no actual deep, meaty character movement with him. That only started happening once he was aged up and he could have a wider variety of stories like romances. Dan making all of this the crux of his story and having the character fight his own relevancy is so interesting, since I can't think of another character who's had to do that, had to literally fight to survive to be a member of the Superman family and to live on and be a part of history. John is sick of the demon's taunts, telling him he doesn't care for all the glory or recognition. He fights since it's the right thing to do, and if the future says he won't be Superman, he is going to defy it. He finally begins to fight back, taking out the dinosaur on the plains in an instant before attacking the caped beings in their hover cars, thanking Tix for reminding him of how important his own identity is. John takes the armor and masks from one of the masked people, something that Tix clearly didn't expect to happen, as John decides he's going to be more than the demon or anyone else. He's going to be Tomorrow Man. So the Tomorrow Man identity was a big mystery in the lead up to Reign of the Superboys, but it was very, very clearly going to be John the entire time. And I do like that Dan is not wasting any time hiding that identity. He's making it part of the story. That's the end goal for John. And getting straight into that is great, since sometimes, those mysteries of who's beneath the mask and who's this new mystery hero can drag out for a long while. And I like that more and more writers seem to be realizing that, just kind of getting to it quite quickly. I love the idea of John being a Tomorrow Man because, again, like I said, how he was sort of borrowing stuff from Nightwing and like how he broke off from Batman to make his own identity. We see that sort of here as well. Even in the costume, we see the costume very much has like a very Nightwing-ish symbol on the front of it, which is still sort of vaguely Superman esque in like a big sort of Superman symbol. And then obviously, the red cape, and he's got stuff borrowed from Connor's Superboy, like the pouches on the leg. There's a little bit of Eradicator going on with like the head masked thing. It looks great. I love the look of this costume. It's so cool. Lucas Meyer did a really good job on designing this. As I said before, you've got to create something away from Superman, and Dan has been building to this as he spotlighted John over a couple of issues over the last few Superman Unlimited issues. We've had little stories with John trying to figure out what he wants to be in the world, who he wants to be. Does he want to be like his father? Does he want to be like his mother? And this is him continuing that story in Reign of the Superboys by John deciding he's going to be his own creation. Master Tiz realizes he just created his own arch nemesis, as this is the being he saw destroy him at the end of time, and in trying to defeat John before that happened, he actually created Tomorrow Man. In something John doesn't see coming, Tiz gives up, admitting defeat, and since this was a fourth dimensional duel, John gets a time gift, as is tradition. The demon cuts a hole in the fabric of reality, and a voice calls out to John, a familiar voice. Tiz tells John that this is his best possible past, wishing the hero good luck as John reaches into the tear and pulls out his younger self, rescuing him from the volcano of Earth 3. So the Super Sun is back, and I really need people to understand that this isn't coming back because, people complained about it or anything like that. This is part of the story Dan is building with John becoming his own person and hero. There will be things that people will have wanted, of course, there'll be a little bit of fan service, but it's not being done just because of that. There'll be a story, and this isn't something that's sticking around. Young John is got to go back to his timeline for older John to exist. If he does indeed stick around, which I'm sure some people want, again, that'd be just incredibly reductive, because you're just going back to those same stories where he had no character development and it was the same thing issue to issue. There was no movement on where he was going and what he was doing. I'm intrigued to see if there will be ripple effects to this, since we've been setting up Earth 3 again over on World's Finest with Mark Waid, and he's involved in the Reign of the Superboy stuff, and I could see it be some way to have Ultraman come back into the mix. He comes back into the present here where Tomorrow Man and John are, and he wants the younger John back because he sees that as like his trophy. He wants him to suffer, sort of thing. So I could see John, the Tomorrow Man John, having to fight Ultraman and kind of confront his past demons, since he never really got that. So I could definitely see a story being built there. So there's some interesting places to go, and I think Dan is the right person to tell these stories. Superman Unlimited issue 11 entered the book into the Reign of the Superboys event, and Dan continued giving John Kent some wonderful character development, and even his first villain, which has no tie to his family, friends, or father. I'm enjoying Dan actually examining John's place in not just the Superman family, but the universe, the DC universe as a whole, and why he should exist and what type of hero he is going to be. He's going about it in a way that will make fans very happy, might also make them very mad, depending on what type of fan of John Kent you are. But also, he's not doing it as a full fan servicey, this is what people want, so we're just doing it just to sell books thing. He has a story in mind for John, and I'm very intrigued to see what that story is going to entail, being that it involves John fighting for his relevancy in the Superman family and his own identity. It's all things that are really interesting for superheroes to deal with, and Dan Slott is doing a fucking fantastic job at delivering that, and I can't wait to see what he does in the rest of the Reign of the Superboys. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.